So what's the best way to pitch you?
Probably on Twitter. Honestly, so at the end of every year, I do sort of a rehash of what happened last year, what's happening in the next year, right?
Yeah.
And I made a couple sort of like clear rules for investing for 2021, where I just sort of went through, okay, what worked in 2020 and what do I want to do more of? Like, what do I want to lean into? And, there were a couple sort of names on the list where it was sort of like when this person sends you a deal, like think really hard about doing it, right? And that was like, okay, those are kind of a few of my trusted sources I want to really lean into, right? But then I really realized as I was thinking through things that for me, obviously I like cold pitches, or I'm open to cold pitches, certainly. But I find that when they come from Twitter, it often means that the person knows something about my interests and investing background to actually make it a pretty worthwhile pitch. And I was thinking about how many checks I've written on Twitter this year. It's kind of interesting.
That's really, really kind of insightful comment. I think that's very applicable. And I think that like one thing that, I remember having a conversation back in the day with a handful of VCs in Brazil that, that I got to know. And I was like, I think all of you should become media companies and like have your own, and communicate directly, because the reality is that one thing that we see, and we see this with like more elite, VCs that have been around for a long time, it's like the double opt-in, and it's like this, like you got this like walled garden of, that is so hard to access. And so I think there's 2 points that you make, which are really interesting. One, be surprised what happens, that comes in your inbox sometimes and actually, is interesting, particularly when someone actually has like done the research and knows about you and knows what you like. Cause, and so it's important for you to be manifesting that out there in the public, because it kind of does your filtering for you, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and it also, you have to be persistent. So I'm thinking of an angel check I'm writing right now into a founder who is pretty well known, has a pretty big social platform, and I think had to write me maybe 5 times for me to actually reply, just because it felt like a cold pitch and I had 50 others to go through that day, or, that week, or whatever it was. And I would actually like to write an article about what she did, because it was so effective. It was such personalized persistence, and it was very just targeted. So like knowing me, knowing what I like to invest in, and making it really easy for me to say yes. And if you're looking for angels, especially, you're just trying to make it easy for them to say yes. It's a different thing when we're talking about funds. It's a completely different level of due diligence. But in terms of, a great place to find angel investors who can kind of support you, ask you some hard questions, but do a lot of hyping, I think Twitter and maybe Clubhouse would be great places to start for founders.
I totally agree. And I learned this the hard way, right? Because when I was a founder, I was just this like kind of slightly desperate, email, LinkedIn bombing everyone. And, of course, like my conversion was 0, right? Like it actually wasn't 0. I ended up getting my first kind of professional check from someone I connect with on Facebook. But incidentally, I wrote a very custom message to them, right? So it just goes to show that, giving the thought makes a lot of sense, and putting the effort in.
And it's interesting too, because, one of the things I've looked at this year is a number of those deals with those sort of matching programs, right? Where the SaaS company that matches the founder's raise with the investor that's in the database. And so I've done some digging into that, and it is very complicated.
Yeah. What's the thing that just gets you when you get a message from a founder as an angel, where you're just like, oh gosh, I'm what is the hot button there that's like, oh, I need to like, this is interesting to me? What are the things that get you?
In terms of what they say, or in terms of the space? I mean, in terms of what they say, for me, and this is what I always tell my founders when they're raising from angels or from VCs, is like, you need to look up that person before that meeting very, very thoroughly. And it drives me nuts when founders don't do that, because it's like such an incredible missed opportunity. If you know you have a pitch meeting with someone, that's like having a job interview, right? So you look them up on LinkedIn, you see who you have in common, and you do a deep dive on that person, study them. It's a mini research project, and then have a couple points that you bring into that pitch meeting, because fundraising is all about social proof, and it's all about psychology. And like, again, you want to make it easier for the investor not to have to say no, since they have to say no all day and all night, right?
Totally. And it's funny because there's the, sometimes you look at this and you're like, oh, the rational brain versus the kind of the emotional brain. And people, if you come from a highly rational standpoint of like, okay, but this is the sector. And, if you don't like, let's face it, investors also like to invest in people they like too, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so like, I mean, it's particularly if you're an institutional investor, you're going to be joining the board of this founder, like you kind of want to like vibe with the founder too. So,
Yeah.
that I think just another proof point of what you said of kind of making sure that and you don't want to obviously fake anything, but you want to understand what they care about and what they've done recently, and those are all things that will just make you closer to them.
I mean, if a VC is investing in you, especially as a lead, they're going to hopefully be around for the next 10 years. So they want to be able to get along with you and offer value and connect with you on things, right? And again, this gets back to why it's important to have VCs of different backgrounds, because that's the only way we're going to get interesting, different companies.